Welcome to your very first attribute training. Before we begin, let's discuss why these types of lessons are so important going forward. We're going to start an exercise right now. We want you to go to section 1 on your worksheet and fill this out as we continue throughout this lesson. First, we're going to build out the entire frame of our current mind through a series of attributes. I want you to pause the video, go to your worksheet, and fill out where you would rate yourself on each attribute. For example, if you think your intelligence attribute, which is our mind's ability to creatively find solutions and solve complex problems, is at a current rating of 5, using a scale of 1 to 10, this would mean that you're in the average or mediocre category. Now go and do this for all the attributes listed on the sheet, and only continue this video once that's complete. I'll pause for a second to allow you to finish. Before we unpause, I need to stress the fact that some people might feel that completing the worksheet is not necessary because they can follow along perfectly fine without doing the work. As we discussed in the intro video, you are not the exception. No one is. You're only going to get out of this what you put into it. And this particular exercise is crucial for you to follow the way I've laid it out, in the exact order it's presented. There's no excuse in the world that could surpass this expectation that I have. The worst case scenario possible is that your printer just broke as I was talking. If this is the case, I want you to go get a piece of paper, pen, and copy the worksheet the good old-fashioned way. Now that you understand the importance of this and have completed section 1, we can continue. So you've completely assessed your current mind frame and have built out how you see yourself. Now I'm going to explain to you how devices work. The scores we use are not going to rate you the way most averages work. A low score like 1 doesn't mean you're bad, a mediocre score like 5 doesn't mean you're average, and a score of 10 doesn't mean you're perfect. Instead, we're going to set each category in the Realize section of our worksheet to 0. So, how does this scoring system work then, you're thinking? Every time I teach you a tool, you'll achieve a landmark or have a breakthrough. You're going to be awarded 1 point in that category. As you progress, your points are going to stack up in each category, as important things like breakthroughs happen with the tools that we create together. The more often we use these tools, the bigger the breakthroughs we're going to have. Think of this as a popular game, such as Warcraft. By using these tools in repetition, you'll be getting stronger while increasing your attributes. But this can only be achieved through repetition. The end goal here is to build up each category in the quest to customize the perfect mind as we see fit. Some of us will struggle in specific categories, therefore needing more points of that type to overcome certain roadblocks. For example, you may have a problem with your attention span, but you may excel in other places. You may find that you're an amazing day trader but can't do it for more than 30 minutes at a time without losing focus. This is where your attention will rely more on creating stronger endurance attributes to knock down those roadblocks. Now that you understand how the system works and why it is important, let's create our first tool and build our strength by 1 point today. Our first goal is going to be self-talk. The clinical definition of self-talk is controlling your inner voice by talking to yourself in order to change the effect it has on your emotional and psychological performances. What does this mean in the real world? 99% of us are constantly using our inner voice to talk ourselves through the day. During the day, you may not even notice how often you negatively talk to yourself. That's because it's living in our subconscious mind and we aren't aware of it. And times that we are aware of it, it's actively bringing us down. There are studies that show that negative self-talk has harmful effects on our mental health and self-esteem. The law of attraction shows us that these negative thoughts are giving birth to negative events in our life. Beyond this, the negative effects of self-talk are proven to increase depression, anxiety, and mood disorders. They are also linked to failing diets and eventually they create eating disorders. Needless to say, negative self-talk impacts us in profound, deep, and unseen ways. Think of this like tremors that happen before an earthquake. Small cracks in our core that eventually lead to the splitting or breaking apart of our mind frame. This is why it's so important as our first tool to talk about this and create a system that will reinforce our mind going forward to prevent this from happening. We don't want to staple these cracks together just so they can hold on for a little bit longer. Instead, we want to completely prevent them from happening. Not only through self talk, but also through the complex tools we'll introduce in the future. For now, though, we'll start with self talk. Let's go back to thinking about the negative impacts of self talk. Think about a situation where you tell someone that you're a day trader. They're going to say, "That's not a viable career choice." When these things are said out loud, they carry mental weight. Afterwards, we rethink that situation in our mind. We process it more like a question that starts to make us doubt ourselves. And when we say it out loud, they re enter our mind with weight to them. Every time we hear it again, it adds more weight to the scale, making it more of a reality that impacts our performance. The problem is, the heavier this weight gets, the more likely we are to believe it. Now, if we replace the negative with positive thoughts, we're starting to reinforce our mind instead of damaging our performance. We've now started to develop our mind frame by building its foundation up. This, of course, has a highly positive impact on our subconscious mind. I think you're starting to see how beneficial self talk can be as it converts positive thoughts into making more money. We can now look at a positive form of self talk. Think about your favorite restaurant. Then think about your favorite meal that you order from that restaurant. You've done this many times before, so it should be an easy example for you to follow. So you order your favorite dish. It comes to the table looking as good as it always does, and you say out loud to the waiter, "Wow, that looks great." This reinforces our mind and gives us the predetermined expectation that every time we order this dish, it's going to look amazing. So, this is what we expect every time we order it because we've told ourselves this in the past through self talk. Now, we take a bite. It's as delicious as we expected. It should be, as it's our favorite item on their menu, and we expect it this way because we've eaten this before. We've just taken our first bite, and guess what we say to our guest? "You got it, we've just repeated the same things we always do." This is incredible as we look at our guest. Then, like clockwork, the waiter comes by and asks us how our food is tasting this evening. And you tell them it's delicious. It's cooked to perfection. You've just completed self talk in a positive way. You constantly told yourself that this is the best food from your favorite restaurant, therefore reinforcing the fact that it will always taste delicious. So there you have it. You actually made it taste better through the effect of positive reinforcement. It's time now to use self talk as our tool. Let's start with the hard one first: self talk during a losing trade. Typically, we're flooded with emotions as we see trades not going our way. We've learned about neutrality, so this shouldn't exist anymore. We are now faced with two options. Option one: we now start to talk to ourselves in a negative way about how stupid we are because we didn't get out of the trade sooner, or that the trade's unfair. Option two: we start saying how thankful we are to be out of the trade and how smart we are to realize this faster and faster every single time. Choice here is clearly option two. By positively reinforcing how we preserved capital, we'll be better emotionally equipped to take our next trade. And by saying out loud how smart we were to get out of that trade in time, we'll be reinforcing our performance and readjusting how quickly we are able to see this negative event in the future. Almost like a race car doing laps around a track. Every time you complete a lap, you stop to tune up your car a little bit. And with each little minor adjustment, you just shaved off a few seconds of your lap time. What a beautiful way to look at it. Constantly decreasing your lap time to be the best on the track. Or, in our case, reinforcing our mind until the bad trades lose no money at all. Remember, there are no bad trades. We're using self talk to take all the bad trades and turn them into positive effects through a call to action. We can now tackle the easy one: self talk in a winning trade. This one's a little different because winning trades are already positive, so the challenge becomes not taking them for granted. If we simply ignore the good trades, then we'll subconsciously be waiting for the bad ones to happen, just so our minds have something to focus on. If we give our minds positive events to focus on instead, by telling ourselves how good we're doing, we'll continue to find these positive trades. See, the trick about self talk is not being afraid to say these things out loud. You may have the odd onlooker thinking you're strange, or it may simply just feel uncomfortable. But that in itself should show you that you're failing at this. You see, the more we self talk, the more natural it becomes, and the less awkward we feel doing it. Just like positive trades. By trading more often, we find them more often by using the success, which leads us to finding more positive trades through this form of reinforcement. One common thing that I see in traders that fail day in and day out is that they constantly talk about their failed trades every day. Think about it for a second. Have you ever seen on a website like Reddit, or possibly in a chat server that you're in, the people who are failing in the markets are the ones constantly talking about their failed trades from the past? They constantly are reliving that negativity, and therefore constantly self talking themselves into losing money. Are you starting to see the connection yet? Being a true pro is not easy. In fact, it requires you to go to extreme lengths, such as talking to yourself. But let me break it to you, this is the edge that pros have. It's not some weird tool or abstract way of thinking. Look at poker, for example. Have you ever watched the big game with the top pros? As they're about to make a call for all their chips, they freeze for a second. Then, in an instance, like a machine, they start talking to themselves. He bet this amount pre-flop. Then he checked on the flop and all of a sudden raised me all in. He can't possibly have kings here because there's a king on the board and I have a king in my hand. Therefore, he must be playing a monster hand, be making this kind of move on me. I think this is the most natural form of self-talk I've ever seen. Poker players who gab to themselves so much at the table that it actually fills more vocal space than real conversations being had between people. This is our mental game at its finest. Poker players using all forms of self-talk to uncover hidden truths and build themselves up. Now, some pros will have a complete meltdown, which of course will affect the way they play for the rest of the night. We all know this term is tilt, but the very best of these pros will say things like, "Wow, what a nice hand you just played." Again, I think this is the most natural form of self-talk I've ever seen. In poker, it's the norm and the edge we need to create to becoming the best. So now, I'll say this to you. Congrats, because for many of you, listening to this will have just been a breakthrough moment. You probably have a smirk on your face realizing you've just conquered one of your biggest flaws and are now equipped with your very first tool in creating your own perfect selves. We have one of two options now. You can either accept this and equip yourself with the very first tool in creating our perfect selves, or you can come back to this video at a later date and rewatch it when you're ready to accept the benefits of self-talk. One of these paths pushes you forward, while the other one stops you dead in your tracks. If you're making the choice to move forward from now, and you want to accept this, then give yourself 1 point on your worksheet under the strength category, and continue to work through the rest of your questions. It will be up to you to keep these worksheets as a means to tracking your progress. It'll be pretty interesting what you determine as positive and negative self-talk. Really think about what the old you was thinking and saying to yourself in your head. Now, think of the new you and what you're going to say to replace those old negative thoughts. What kind of positive effects will they have on you? Well, I suppose that's determined by how often you say them and what you're saying. Of course, when using self-talk, the more beneficial the reinforcement, the better you're going to be tuning your mind. That's it for this lesson in creating your very first tool, self-talk. Now, practice your self-talk and write down the things you're going to say to yourself on your worksheet in the future.